Welcome to Starmet Corporation. Starmet Corporation began as a metallurgical laboratory within the Massachusetts Institute of Technology during World War II. Since our establishment as a private industry in 1954, we have maintained our reputation as a supplier of advanced technology specialty metals products. Starmet remains a leader in new materials development. The company produces specialty products through the use of advanced extrusion, power metallurgy, and melting and casting technologies. Associated with the development and manufacture of these specialty metals are a variety of government regulations to help ensure a safe work environment for employees, visitors, and contractors. Unless otherwise specified, Starmet employees will escort all visitors and contractors at all times. Starmet Corporation is licensed to handle, process, and store depleted uranium. Regulatory standards require that any individual having the need to enter restricted areas where the depleted uranium is processed or stored, must be provided with information about the material and made aware of required safety procedures. Depleted uranium, or DU, is a low-level radioactive material. It is a byproduct of an enrichment process used to produce fuel for nuclear power reactors. DU is a very dense heavy metal, about 1.6 times heavier than lead. Because of its high density, it is ideally used as radiation shielding, counterweights in airplanes, helicopters, and missiles, as well as armor-piercing projectiles in military ordnance applications. As stated earlier, DU does emit a small amount of radiation. It cannot be seen, heard, nor tasted. The material gives off three types of radiation: alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha particles can travel about 6 to 8 inches in air, but can be stopped by as little as a piece of paper. In reference to humans, the outer layer of dead skin stops alpha particles. Beta particles travel distances up to about 28 feet in air, and can be stopped or shielded by 1/8 inch thick aluminum or plastic sheet stock. This type of radiation can penetrate the skin to a depth of about 3/8 of an inch. Major body parts are not affected since the depth of penetration isn't enough to reach these areas. Our concern with beta radiation is its potential effect on the eyes. Gamma, the third type of radiation, is the penetrating type that is comparable to X-rays. When measured with a Geiger counter, depleted uranium emits beta plus gamma radiation at about 240 millirem per hour. Only 5% of that emission is gamma radiation. This means you would have to hold DU in your hand for 1 hour to receive a 10 to 12 millirem gamma exposure. To put this into perspective, one chest X-ray will give you an exposure of 10 to 12 millirems in less than 1 second. A number of our restricted area operations produce some airborne depleted uranium and contaminated dusts. We do not want it to be inhaled or ingested into the body. For this reason, Starmet, like all radiation facilities, has a policy that prohibits smoking, eating, or drinking in restricted areas. Since this is a smoke-free facility, no smoking is allowed in the building. Please note that there are water bubblers located within some restricted areas. Because there is no hand-to-mouth contact when using these bubblers, there should be no cause for an intake of contamination. Smoking is allowed in a designated area outside the building, and eating and drinking from a container are allowed outside the restricted area. But in all three cases, only after you have washed and monitored yourself to assure that no contamination is present. Starmet requires that safety glasses be worn in all restricted areas. Safety glasses are not only an occupational safety requirement, they also shield the eyes from radiation. The film badge you've been issued is a radiation dosimeter. It will measure any external exposure you may receive during your stay in our facility. Whenever you leave Starmet property, your badge must be returned to its appropriate storage container in order for us to get a meaningful reading. Records are kept of individual exposure results. Our administrative occupational exposure limits have been set lower than regulatory limits to ensure no exposure above regulatory limits. Should you exceed your limit, we are required to inform you of the fact and take further steps to investigate and resolve the situation.
To date, Starmet has not had to inform a visitor or contractor of an exposure above limits. Depending on the work area a visitor or contractor is entering or the work to be performed, it may be appropriate for Starmet to issue a work uniform and suitable safety equipment to use while you're here. You may also be required to submit a baseline urine sample for uranium analysis. This will be determined by a health and safety staff member during a pre-work discussion. All employees, visitors, and contractors must follow established procedures to avoid cross-contamination of unrestricted areas with material from restricted areas. To accomplish this, you must pass through a change area before entering or exiting a restricted area. Following is a demonstration of the change area procedure. As a visitor entering the change area, you'll put on shoe covers, lab coat, and safety glasses before entering the restricted area. Employees are issued uniforms and a second pair of safety shoes for use inside the restricted area. On exiting the restricted area, remove your lab coat and deposit it in the dirty laundry bin. Then sit down on the bench, keeping your feet on the red or hot side of the floor. Remove one shoe cover and place the clean shoe on the other side of the bench, the clean or green side. Do the same with the second shoe cover. Dispose of the used shoe covers in the contaminated booty drum. Wash your hands with soap and water at the sink and monitor yourself on the hand and shoe monitor located in the change area. Step up on the foot pads, insert your hands in the hand slots, and press down to activate the system. This procedure takes about 10 seconds. If readings are over the limits, you'll have to rewash or decontaminate as necessary. Any tools, equipment, clipboards, or miscellaneous items brought into a restricted area must be wiped down, monitored, and declared free of contamination before you can remove them from the restricted area or the premises. In this regard, we suggest you bring in only those tools you need to perform your job. We'll provide you with clean plastic or craft paper on which you can place your tools to avoid setting them on exposed, potentially contaminated surfaces. We'll also provide you with cloths for wipe down and appropriate guidance and assistance to minimize unforeseen delays in departure. Starmet can provide many common type tools as we maintain a large inventory. Ask your supervisor or the project engineer before taking personal property or tools into restricted areas. If during your visit it becomes necessary to evacuate all or part of the facility because of an actual or simulated emergency, an appropriate announcement will be made on the public address system, followed by the sounding of the evacuation alarm. Your Starmet escort will accompany you out of the area via the closest, safest means of egress. Do not take time to remove shoe covers or use a hand and foot monitor during an emergency evacuation. Remain with your escort so you can be directed to an assembly area and accounted for.
If your anticipated length of stay with us is 2 weeks or longer, you'll be subject to the same basic requirements outlined for employees. Because of the variety of work projects which might be contracted out at one time or another, it becomes necessary for us to evaluate each program individually in order to include pertinent safety requirements. A special radiological work permit may be required, as well as a more defined orientation for those workers who will perform the job. The rule of thumb to be followed is that if any question exists regarding your work assignment in a restricted area, stop work and get the answers you need before proceeding. Please provide the information requested on the standing radiological work permit for visitors and contractors. If you've received previous occupational exposure to radiation but do not recall the exposure, please indicate whether you were warned about approaching a limit or denied access to work with source material. If so, we'll contact your company to obtain your current exposure information. Female visitors and contractors are also asked to read and sign the sheet entitled Information to Female Workers. If you are or could be pregnant, we suggest you make this information known to a Health and Safety Department representative before you enter restricted areas. In order to conduct research, development, and the manufacture of specialty metal products, Starmet is required to maintain an inventory of certain materials and chemicals in various quantities. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, mandates a hazard communication requirement for employees who work with specific chemicals in their assigned areas. For the purposes of this orientation, visitors and contractors will be provided a generic overview of chemicals and other materials used in the facility. New employees will be provided job-specific training before starting their work assignments. Potentially hazardous process materials include sulfuric acid, hydrogen peroxide, nitric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and sodium hydroxide, which are used in pickling and cleaning operations. Acetone is a solvent used in laboratory quantities. Its use is closely controlled because of its volatility and flammability. A variety of cleaning agents are used by our custodial staff, including detergents, wax strippers, spot removers, etc. Heavy metals found in the plant include depleted uranium, tungsten, molybdenum, copper, and lead. Operations involving the use of beryllium metal are stringently controlled and require the issuance of a beryllium work permit, describing the procedure to be followed, personnel involved, and personal protective equipment to be used. Pyrophoric metals, those which can spontaneously ignite in air, that are in use at Starmet restricted areas include depleted uranium, zirconium, and titanium. Solid metal presents no unusual fire problem, but chips and fine particulate powder are pyrophoric and must be handled appropriately. Hydrogen gas is used in a small furnace in the R&D laboratory. Use of this furnace is restricted to a limited number of personnel who are totally familiar with the standard operating procedure. Acetylene gas is used by the company welder and other qualified personnel for metal cutting and heating requirements. As you make your way through the building, you'll notice that containers of hazardous materials are labeled to identify the chemical, provide its hazard warnings, and the name of the chemical manufacturer or other responsible party. A master file of material safety data sheets, MSDS, for all chemicals used in the workplace is maintained by the Health and Safety Department. Supervisors maintain a file of MSDSs for their particular work areas. MSDS stations are also located at the visitor change area, the E-building change area, and in the corridor leading to the beryllium, aluminum, and clean room areas. New employees and visitors and contractors to be with us for 2 weeks or longer will receive a Safety Rules and Practices Handbook. It is a compilation of Starmet's basic occupational and radiological safety requirements. If you have any questions regarding the information included in this tape, please notify your Starmet contact or a health and safety representative. In our effort to comply with all federal, state, and local regulations and to operate our facility in a safe manner, we request your assistance. Please notify your Starmet contact if during your stay with us you observe or suspect defects which could create a substantial safety hazard. Your notification will not only trigger an immediate evaluation of the situation, it will also initiate corrective action. This brings to a close our safety orientation for visitors and contractors. Again, we welcome you to Starmet. Thank you for your attention and hope your stay with us will be productive.